The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. The apostles rejoined Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. Then he said to them, "You must come away to some lonely place all by yourselves and rest for a while." For there were so many coming and going that the apostles had no time even to eat. So they went off in a boat to a lonely place where they could be by themselves. But the people saw them going, and many could guess where. And from every town they all hurried to the place on foot and reached it before them. So as he stepped ashore, he saw a large crowd, and he took pity on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he set himself to teach them at some length. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning, all. Welcome, and nice to be here. We're at the end of a section in Mark's Gospel today. Last week we sent the 12 out with their L plates. We remember we took the analogy of they're going out to get there, and they've come back now, and Jesus is going to take them through their P plates and the red peas and the green peas, or whatever the process now that the young people have to go through that I didn't have to go through in my day. Thank goodness. But so Jesus is teaching the 12. He's teaching them to minister the way he ministered himself. And it says the apostles rejoined Jesus and they told him all they had done and taught. That to do and to teach is a theme that comes through from the Sermon on the Mount and is a motto of many religious congregations in our community, to do and to teach. And he said to them, "You must come apart, you must come away to some lonely place all by yourselves and rest for a while." The wisdom of Jesus to ask people to come after they've been ministering and ministering hard, to come and to rest a while. It's the teaching of the church for a priest and religious to have a week of retreat each year. You'd be well advised to think about that in your own ministry and in your own time. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Huh? And why we do that, he said there were so many comings and goings that the apostles had no time even to eat. Well, there's the comings and goings can be the distractions, can't they? That you come apart, he says, and rest a while. I have a friend who says, "Come apart and rest a while, or you'll come apart." Yeah, I think it's a very good lesson in this part, that in Jesus' own ministry. He was forever trying to seek quiet time. He rarely achieved it. Seems to me the only time Jesus could get quiet time was in the middle of the night, when he stayed up all night and did without his sleep. That can be, come apart and rest a while because of the comings and goings. The apostles had no time even to eat. I don't know about you, I've been busy in my life, but I was never ever been that busy. I can't remember ever missing a meal in my whole life because I was working that. Some meals were a little bit late. Some meals were a little bit colder than they should have been. But I don't think I ever missed a meal. And yet in this, we're going to see in the same chapter that the people Jesus was teaching were so enthralled with his teaching that they forgot to eat. Remember the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. So Jesus was tired, the apostles were tired, comings and goings, and he did everything. He said, "Come apart, let's find a lonely place." And they went around in the boat to get away. They were talking about their ministry, where they'd been and what they'd done. We know from other Gospels that they had some problems with that. They had problems with casting out spirits that didn't go when they don't. And Jesus had to give them teaching about fasting and prayer and other ways of ministering. He did that. Perhaps the only time he had to do that was in the boat trip when they're going around the lake, heading for, I don't know, a little town along the way, maybe if they left from Capernaum, which we think they did, the next little village around the corner was Magdala, where Mary came from, Mary Magdalene came from. I don't know, we're not told exactly where it was, but we know that there's a huge number of people there when they got there. So he stepped ashore and he saw a large crowd and he took pity on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he set himself to teach them at some length. Now, Mark makes the point consistently that Jesus' most important ministry was teaching. Jesus' most important ministry was teaching. And he came to teach people. And he got swamped with crowds that probably were more interested in healing than in teaching. You know yourself, if you put on a healing service, you fill the church easily. If you have a night on social justice and the Ten Commandments, well, you probably wouldn't get so many people. Right? So Jesus set out to teach them. And his ministry here, he had pity on them. That lovely word, that Jesus had pity on the people. When he saw the large crowd, he wanted to do something. He wanted to go away. He wanted to get seclusion. He wanted to get rest. He wanted to get teaching time with his apostles. But when he saw the crowd, he had pity on the crowd. This compassion of Jesus is right through the gospel in everything he said and done. It is the most wonderful characteristic of Jesus, that his ability to suffer with us, compassion, to suffer with us, that he had this ability to sympathize with us and to feel, not only to feel as we feel, but to take his feelings upon himself for us, to carry another person's burdens, was the characteristic of Jesus. Now, a little bit of liturgical teaching here. At this stage, the Gospel of Mark will go on to the teaching of Jesus and the miracle of the loaves and fishes. So it's a breaking part in the Gospel. And because we told you earlier in the year that Mark's Gospel is much shorter than the other Gospels, and to make it last for the whole of the year, we have now a 5-week break from the Gospel of Mark in the Sunday readings. And the 5 weeks is just one chapter of the Gospel, the longest chapter in the Gospels. Who would know the longest chapter in the Gospels? It's in John's Gospel, and it's chapter 6. Chapter 6, the chapter on the bread of life. On the chapter of the bread of life. So over 5 Sundays, we'll have the Gospel of John, and we'll have the chapter 6 of the Gospel, which is based on the theme of your community, the bread of life. And there'll be 5 consecutive teachings on the bread of life. And then after that, we'll come back to Mark again. So just to fill you in, so you'll be ready for that. Next Sunday is, I'm here, it's the last Sunday in this month of July. It is July, isn't it? Yes, yeah, all right. Yeah, one more Sunday. And then after that, in August, I'm rostered off from this community every year. So whatever the priests that come, that's how as other priests would, I wouldn't have a monopoly on this place, and other priests can come and know they're welcome. And the day will come when I won't be able to come and you won't be stuck and be without a priest again and go through those difficult days that I heard that you had before. So just to fill in the plan, that we break from the gospel, we go to the miracle of the loaves and fishes, which is the beginning of John's gospel. So the same miracle, but instead of in Mark, it'll be in John. And then John follows from that into the wonderful teaching of Jesus as the bread of life. So you should look forward to that. It's a long chapter in John. It's 60-something verses. Well worth study, get ready for it, think it over, spend a month on it, because it is the theme of your community. It's the heart of the Christian life, the Eucharist, and for us, it's a very important sacrament. Those who got that book that I recommended, many of you got it. Get it out again in the next month. Read it more and more and more for a good understanding of the month of the Eucharist. If you haven't got the book, you look up the side on the Google it. There's an hour and 10-minute video there on the Jewish roots of the Eucharist. The Jewish roots of the Eucharist. Couldn't recommend it higher, and spend some time on it, because everything we do in our Eucharist goes back to the Jewish roots of the Passover, to the Exodus, to the whole history of the Christian faith, which is based on the faith that Jesus had as a little boy. Amen? Amen. Amen.